Caesars of Rome, Roman Catholic Church, crowns of Europe, and then the corporatizing of our reality and fictionalizing
That's where
of
I
our
want
lives.
everybody else to
It was the minute people realized what money is, that it's a totem of time, and time is a 1260 fabrication by the Vatican that dislocated our relationship from the earth and turned us into these kind of insecure creatures waiting to be governed. Before that, there was no question of us needing governance. When we didn't have TikTok time imposed on us, we were told that we were running out of resources, running out of
He's turned
limits.
so interesting.
Yes. So we have to awaken from within this Babylonian dream spell, which is actual black magic that was put on us by the Sumerians 5,000 years ago, the Phoenicians. And once you get it, it's like, oh my God, then you take your watches off, you never wear a watch again, and you never have a clock on the wall, and you even take the algorithm off your computer, so you don't ever see this tick-tock, because that programs death into the DNA. Before 1260 time, there was no death in the accepted sense. People didn't live for 70 years and 10. People went on living for hundreds and hundreds of years. Hundreds and hundreds of years. Normally up until about 800 or 900 years, and then naturally the body would want to go into dissolution, and you'd migrate your soul elsewhere, and then come back into another incarnation. But this whole reality framework we live in today is totally artificial. It's already AI. It's already transhumanist AI. So the last 4,500 years since the Sumerians, this is what's happened. We were grown in petri dishes 10,000 years ago. Okay, that's the truth of the matter.
That's what I'm dying for people to clue into that part. That's why I say I want you to be the first person I interview, because I'm like, I've seen it since I was a little girl, and I feel like I definitely don't feel like I belong here most of my life, because I'm like, everybody talks in time.
Well, I've taken religious leaders into this to meet with the people who spoon-feed aliens. I've done this stuff over 23, 24 years as a foundation. We've been bridging that amongst leadership in the basement and behind the curtain. So I've had, and we dealt with trans-dimensional technologies and alien technologies, doing the forensic analysis of these things and getting involved. But I don't know if you've heard of the Lazarus Initiative, right? But that, if you saw, there was the second one where we exposed Alexander the Great's tomb in Jordan and the alien technology that's been discovered there. It's all on film. But these are real things that, of course, academia is not teaching us and mainstream media is not showing us. Only Hollywood plays with those ideas. Keep us in the Stone Age.
So how did you become interested in all of this?
Well, I didn't. I was interested only in understanding what war was, because I grew up in a war.
That's right.
So when I hung up my guitars, I was like, well, let me just purpose whatever resources and mini celebrity that I had at the time towards setting up a peace foundation for intercultural relationships and what have you. And that's what I focused on. I focused on just peace and intercultural, interfaith relations with my foundation. And I went on a 5-year diplomatic mission, meeting all the religious and political leaders around the world. I mean, really, all the top ones, from the Mandelas to the Dalai Lamas and so on. This is in the late 90s. And then as I went on that diplomatic mission, I was educated by leaders. The ones who liked me sat me down and said, listen, Sasha, you're wasting your time, son. None of this is factored into, peace is not factored into the business plan. You're going to be wasting your time. The whole thing's rigged. Everything's rigged. And then, so after 5 years, I gave up that diplomacy work and I decided to change my focus and not play into peace anymore, because I knew that it was never going to be factored in. And then I started to use my access instead to sit down with cardinals or bishops or imams or sheikhs or warlords. And I spent a lot of time meeting warlords in North Africa and the Middle East. Got into a lot of trouble as well doing it. Very dangerous stuff. I'd never do it again today. I don't have the nerve that I had 20 years ago. But they taught me also the truth of these things. And then slowly you start to hear the real history emerge. When you're sitting down with the Coptic bishops in the desert of Scetis in an underground catacomb, these are the guys who handed the Dead Sea Scrolls to us, 50 years ago. These people know stuff underground. They live underground. Now you know a bit about this. You travel some of those spaces that I've been to as well. The reason I went to the Siwa Oasis was to sit with the Sheikh Mohammed there, and who's the Sheikh of Siwa. And that was 20 years ago, to learn from him. This is in the Great White Sahara. And I know this woman because she went there. No, not many people have been. But the point is, you go. At that time, I was going to all these zany places. Now, in order to meet with and hear firsthand, and then you start to go, fuck me. Every single thing that Princeton, Yale, Harvard, Oxford, and Cambridge, because those are the five, the main ones, that the progenitors of the grand deception, great lies, because they control. That's why the CDC, Center for Disease Control, and the bioweaponry that's afflicting the whole world right now comes from these institutions. They're the enabler, the protectors, because it's always a paper from Yale or Princeton or Oxford or Cambridge that authorizes the Center for Disease Control to be able to do something and put it out with the World Health Organization. So they're all complicit in this evil orchestra of deception. And it's so well crafted that most of the academics and the professors themselves don't know.
They believe it.
They don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know how the wickedness is compartmentalized within their own faculties.
So
it's clever stuff.
What's the quickest way to get to where we need to go?
Well, that's what I round everything I say in the last
Did I
7
miss
years.
it?
No, I say pure truth,
Yeah.
right action, in the now, is the path of least resistance to the highest outcome. And if every human being simply stood in the flame of pure truth and conducted only right action today, that's the path of least resistance to the highest outcome. You don't need a fucking religious doctrine, excuse my language. You don't need a Bible. You don't need a gospel. You don't need a star chart. You don't need anything.
We
it's
have it.
God-given conscience.
We have it inside.
That's it.
Yeah.
And when we start to listen to that and follow that guidance, the inner guidance, that's the Christed nature. And once we do that at the individual level sufficiently, it becomes a collective morphogenetic awakening. Boom. And then the thrall of Babylon disintegrates, literally, at the frequency level.
So what does our new earth look like to you?
Well, it doesn't have asphalt in it. It doesn't have any synthetic molecules in it. The new earth that I envision eradicates all synthetic molecules. They become outlawed under unilateral ban. All synthetic molecules should be eradicated. All.
They say they won't make it through the vibrational
Synthetic
shit.
molecules won't be able to make it through the micronova explosion in 2046. I know that anyway.
Gotcha.
But the point is, a lot of suffrage can still happen between now and 2046.
Ways off.
So we can change, we can mitigate the suffrage the sooner we activate the collective. And that does create a psionic boom, a flare, through morphogenesis, which will bring into equilibrium all of those mutant molecules and atoms. The geometry of those atoms will restore in all the poisoned air, water, soil, mind, heart of the planet.
How do we activate them?
Pure truth.
You
right
already
action
said that.
in the
Yeah. You said that. Well, I mean,
because that's the answer.
Yeah,
That's the
no,
answer.
but I mean, it's like we want to wake them up a lot quicker, and it's just one at a time, or do we do it energetically, or both?
It's we stop putting the question out there and start living the embodiment of the
Quit
answer.
making it a okay.
Yeah, and that's the message of Yeshua, Jesus, which is to embody the living gospel.
Love it.
And that's it, to be the living word. I am the word. Live it. Be
Are
it.
the light. Mm-hmm.
No, and no separation. No separation from me and the Godhead. So this is where my argument is with Middle America and its religious idolatry. Because alas, 90+% of good Christians are idolaters. And they would horrify the Master Jesus. I know that. But the same thing with all Buddhists today would horrify Siddhartha Buddha, Gautama Buddha, who left one message, actually, when he died, enlightened, for thousands of years ago, which was if you find the Buddha on your path, kill him. And that is true. That is the greatest truth of Buddhism. So the fact that you've got a bunch of crypto Buddhists all around the world wearing yellow caps and red caps and, bells and whistles and shrines and all that bullshit, that's all idolatrous nonsense. The Buddha rejected that whilst he was alive. So, and the same thing with Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is that he hated idolatry. He went into the Kaaba in Mecca, that big square thing. He went in at the time, when was it, 1400 years ago. He went into the Kaaba and he trashed all the idols in there. and walked out and said, "You're all idolaters. There is but one God." You know? And of course, Islam then became weaponized, taken over by these mad sheikhs and political agendas, and the next is it was actually taken over by the Vatican. So it was the Catholic Church defiled Islam and weaponized it,
So what
as
would
it
you
did to as it did to Christianity. The whore of Babylon is the Vatican. You've got pedophiles, you've got career pedophiles, you know, running the College of Cardinals and inhabiting the throne of St. Peter. It's an abomination.
I want to hear your response to, I asked my preacher when I was about 18. I felt like Jesus Christ dying on the cross was a human sacrifice. I saw it like that as a child, and I got kicked out of his home for even asking that question. And I've been asked that question by Christians. All your experiences, what would your answer be to that, Christian? Because they really cling to that.
What was the question?
Was
that Jesus Christ being crucified to die for our sins.
Yeah.
That does not.
It's an absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
And that's part of the abomination.
Yeah.
And it's part of the false iconography that's put up there in order to snap us out of living the gospel. And instead to step back and go, it's been done for me. I don't need to step up.
That's what
I don't need to step up. I can continue to defraud myself by simply banging my head on the floor as a good Muslim, or playing with my rosary beads as a good Catholic. And all of that is the iconography of idolatry. And it takes a hell of a lot for a good Christian or a good Muslim or a good Buddhist to step away from childish things and go, I'm only going to reconvene the covenant as it exists within the temple. Yeah, that's so beautiful, because when people do that, they truly become supernatural and blissful as well. That's where euphoria is to be found. You know? But put it this way, 2,000 years of Christian dogma hasn't exactly served us. We're on the brink of fucking catastrophic failure of our species. Right. None of them have served us, obviously, because we've arrived here. And here is pretty uncool right now. You know, when you've got fucking Anthony Fauci lurching at you with a lethal injection. Whatever.
Do you know much about his involvement with the creation of HIV?
Yes, I do, but I'm not going to speak to on this subject.
Okay.
I know more than you could possibly imagine. And just so you know, I've known that for 15 years.
What was the
long
question?
before it became, you know, a subject of interest to the world. Not because my foundation was involved in 2006, 7, 8, into 9, looking at this stuff and investigating forensically H1N1 and those SARS and the avian flu and the swine flu and the bovine flu. Years ago I was going, hang on, what is it with these relentless influenzas? This is clearly, you know, bioweaponry that's being tested out on different strains of mammal or different strains of species. But it was also the fact that you tally the avian genetics to the Asian people, avian and Asian. You know, there's some correlations here now. We're talking about galactic DNA and the cosmogenesis of humans. Like we are snake people and bird people. Primarily it goes back to snake DNA and bird DNA, if you want to go back hundreds of millions of years. So the tampering by the CDC and by these satanic Luciferian interests behind what's going on with the so-called vaccines and the so-called COVID and so-called Corona, blah blah blah. It's all connected to galactic wars that are playing out here.
I get that.
Actually, over 10 years ago, I went to the International Vaccine Conference in Washington, and at that point, I stopped vaccinating my animals.
Oh, it should never.
It's unbelievable.
But it's genetic warfare. Genetic warfare's always been a game. Why? Why are they trying to tap into the crystalline property of actualized Christed Adamite blood? That's the good human. They want the good human. They need to biohack into the good human DNA RNA story. Why? Because that element of the good human's blood is the capacitor. It's literally a telegraphy. It's a antennasis, a fractal antenna of universal life force. So we carry within our blood the capacitance to bring in limitless amounts of universal life force and beam it into the temporal realm. Each one of us is more powerful than a star. Fact. This human being has more power than a sun. Fact. We'll get to that eventually as a species when we awaken. But the fact is that these sons of bitches have known that for a long time. So the Babylonian Mysterian cult operates on the basis that it knows that if it can continuously hack into us and subvert that life force because we offer it up to them when they give us bread and circuses like football stadiums and rock and roll concerts and MTV and drugs and consumerism and high street and billboards and everything that's out there and little baby Jesus, okay, and Ganesha the elephant. All of those icons and idols are what harvest our life force because we give belief to them. So don't believe in anything. And this is the hardest message for Christians to understand. I say, forget your beliefs, your trust, and your faith. Those three things, you should incinerate them. You must no longer have trust or faith or belief in anything. You must enter into the knowing. Because that's when you claim the power and you move into alignment, into the covenant with the living flame, the living gospel. That's the real message of Yeshua always was. Hey. It's a conspiracy in here, just so you know.
Can you speak a little bit more about the supernova?
Well, you know, I woke up this morning and I had this kind of caution in me going, do not speak about the micronova event too keenly. And another part of me said, well, why not? And I was having a struggle with it as I was awakening this morning. I'm nervous about speaking to it because it's my contention based on conversations I've had with astrophysicists, leading mathematicians, astrophysicists, and astronomers.
I think it's going to happen.
And we know that there is an event in 2046. We know that middle of the year, more or less. We know that the micronova is going to occur, that the sun is going to explode. Not obliterate, it's going to have a kind of flaring. And that micronova event is going to catalyze a field of light, vibral light through the entire solar system that is going to bring us into our vertical ascension.
Cool.
And the Babylonian priest bankers, draconians, know full well that it's coming. And that's why they were building underground bases and tunnels and all of it. Oh, and the reason why Trump and the good military brass took out most of those, and that underground war continues to this day. I have the forensic evidences of this. I've met with a leading scientist who analyzes the seismic demolitions going on. Where's Debbie? She's run out. We've sat with this guy on multiple occasions and studied what's going on. It's incredible. So we know that the takedown of the so-called DUMBs, or deep underground military bases, is underway, has been for at least 3 years now. In fact, courtesy of one Donald J. Trump and good cats in the Pentagon.
China Lake, 2019.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of these facilities are 12 kilometers long and 6+ kilometers deep. We're talking about epochal, huge facilities. They had generations, decades, and trillions of dollars of taxpayers' money was going into those because they were preparing to be able to hide underground when the shit hits the fan, probably in 2046. Now that option's been taken off and they can't hide there anymore, there's a different game, and the different game now is the colonization of Mars by best accounts. You want to ask, why is Elon Musk saying publicly that he hopes to die on Mars? Well, I hope he does as well. I hope that all the Martians fuck off and die on Mars. So build your spacecraft, and leave. But you see, that they know. Only the Christed human will be able to remain here with that vibral impact that's coming. There's no question about that. But there has to be a threshold event, I believe, of 144,000 human beings, actually. By that time, in order to have activated the Tesla shield around the planet, whereupon we can take the entire plane with us into the vertical ascension.
Okay, so with that being said, I've always wondered this about you. Do you eat a particular way? Are there foods that you avoid? Because I personally believe for whatever reason, I didn't even read a book, but in 2018, I was like, just done with me. I was just done. I just felt a calling.
It's a subject I've really looked at tremendously. You go try hang out with the Maasai for a few weeks and see how you can eat without having meat. You can't. The same thing.
No, I just-
So, but
yeah,
the
so-
point I'm making is that I travel around the world constantly, and I'll eat more or less whatever's in front of me.
Right.
I will never cook meat or buy meat, but I eat chicken by choice. I eat fish and chicken in Bali. And I do eat dairy, and I understand the power of chondroitin sulfate, and I think you're very stupid if you don't eat dairy. When I say dairy, I'm talking about butter and cream. Milk is not good for you, but milk is not the same thing as cream. The cream molecule is very different to the milk molecule. Cream, good, milk, bad. Butter, very good.
Very good.
You need chondroitin sulfate to build cells. We've treated patients in stage 4 cancer in the past and resurrected one on red meat, and she was a vegan for 30 years.
Okay, nice.
And it was the one thing she needed to bring her back from death's door was red meat, raw red meat.
Right, yeah.
So we've actually seen that happen. Go, oh my God! All right, all the bets are off. Everyone's blood chemistry is different.
It's different.
And you have
Exactly.
to treat the world in that way.
Yep.
I wondered if you if any time along your journey that you sort of felt a shift, like this is how I
How I would like to eat and how I intend to end my days in this world is by not eating at all. That's my answer to you. Because I know enough about so-called breatharianism and sun gazing. I know enough about the pure science of it to know categorically that we don't need to eat food at all. We don't need to drink water or anything at all. The human technology is built to assimilate all trace minerals and vitamins just through vibral light. You don't
Right.
even need to do sun gazing.
Exactly.
You can simply assimilate by being fully actualized in the now. In the same way that if you lead a fully